Everybody want to get started? So just to, hello everyone, welcome to the lead nurturing and lead scoring session. Just to make sure, this is the lead nurturing and lead scoring session. If you're here for the channel session, that's somewhere else and I can't help you, I'm sorry. But, this is for marketing. I'm pretty excited. I'm a marketer. My name is John Miller. I'm the Vice President of Marketing for Marketo. And I'm just really excited to have a whole room of marketers and get to spend the next hour talking about marketing. Especially here we are at Salesforce, and it's the Sales Cloud and Service Cloud, and what about marketing? So sometimes I feel a little bit like we need some extra love and attention, and that's what really we're trying to do here today. I should also point out, tomorrow night is the Marketing Cloud launch party. So anybody who is in marketing, make sure you get an invitation to that party. It's going to be at the St. Regis down the street, where again, we're going to show marketing some love. So let's get started talking about lead nurturing and lead scoring. We have just an information-packed session. My goal is you're going to walk out of here today with some actionable things that you can get started on immediately tomorrow, doing a better job with managing, developing your leads for the sales team. So the agenda. Again, my name is John Miller. I'm the Vice President of Marketing for Marketo. I'm going to introduce the topic. What is lead nurturing? What is lead scoring? Why the hell do you need it? For those of you who are new to it, that's going to be helpful to you. For those of you who are advanced, I don't think I'm going to bore you too much with that. I have got some pretty good, interesting data to share. Then I'm joined by two other kind of marketing experts. Dyke Henson, who's the Vice President of Marketing over at PivotLink, is going to talk about lead nurturing more in depth, how to develop raw leads into opportunities, and then bring back some of those dead leads back to life. And then we have Emily Salas from ClapNet, who will talk about a practical guide to implementing lead scoring in your organization. She'll share her experience about how she really built the credibility with the sales team for lead scoring and got it up and running in their function. And then finally, many of you probably have gotten a copy so far already of the Definitive Guide to Lead Nurturing. It's a really good workbook. If you haven't received it, we've got plenty of copies on your way out. But I'll give you kind of, an overview, a quick introduction to how to do this in your organization, share some tips and best practices. The whole thing's going to take hopefully about 45 minutes, so we'll have time for Q&A at the end. And I'd love to get into the dialogue and the discussion with everybody. Leaky revenue cycle. I always feel kind of weird sitting here in 2009 and talking about how the internet's changed everything, right? Because, that seems like a passé thing to say now. But then I take a step back and remember that Google and Salesforce both got started only 10 years ago, in 1999. Isn't it amazing how much has changed in the last 10 years? Right? Google didn't exist 10 years ago. Before Google, there was not ready access to information. Right? So if you were a buyer and you wanted to learn about a company's products or services, regardless of what you were selling, the best, easiest, most expedient route to that information was to talk to a sales rep from that company. So therefore, it was natural to, when you became a lead at a company, that the marketing team would give that contact information to sales, and sales would call that person up. The salespeople expected it, the buyer expected it. Here we are today, though, in 2009. That's not true anymore. Buyers today use search, ready access to online information, social media sites, to learn, research, and get access to all that information that they couldn't have had access to before on their own time and on their own schedule. And as a result, there's this gap that's been developed between the time when you first meet a prospect and when the time that prospect wants to speak to a salesperson. Right? On average, this is true of Marketo's data. Rain Today did a study which found about the same data. Of all the leads that you generate, about 25%, only 25%, are going to be ready for the sales team right now. The other 25%, that might be garbage. Emily will talk a little bit about some of her sort of garbage leads. And then the other 50% of these leads are perfectly qualified people that just aren't yet ready to talk to a salesperson. There's been some research by Brian Carroll and others that show that of that 50%, a full 70% will eventually buy a solution from either you or one of your competitors. Right? If you take that 50% that's not ready and give them immediately to a salesperson, you're going to annoy the customer because they don't want to talk to a salesperson yet, and you're going to annoy the salespeople because they're going to say that lead wasn't any good. But if you ignore those leads and don't do anything with them, that full 70% of them are going to buy from somebody, but perhaps not you. So essentially, you end up leaving about a third of your revenue on the table if you sort of ignore this lead development gap. Lead scoring, lead nurturing is all about then plugging the leak. A definition of lead nurturing is keeping in touch and building relationships with qualified prospects, regardless of their timing to buy. 2 key points in there: qualified. I'm not telling you to nurture everybody. Nurture the ones that are actually going to buy a product someday. And regardless of their timing to buy. We all know salespeople want to talk to people who are going to buy now, right? Marketing's job is to talk to everybody regardless of their timing to buy. And that's what nurturing is all about, developing those relationships. Today we're going to tell you how to do that. There's one other way I like to think about lead nurturing, and that's marketing to the people you already know. You've already spent money to acquire. The Bridge Group found it takes on average 7 to 8 marketing touches to turn a raw lead into a sales-ready opportunity, right? Think about how much more cost-effective it is. If you have a marginal dollar to spend, are you going to spend it buying a brand new person, or are you going to spend it marketing to one of the people you already have in your system to develop that lead further along, right? Unlocking the value of that house database you already have is another definition of lead nurturing, which is part of the reason it drives such great ROI. So speaking of ROI, I've had many customers ask, how do I make a business case for investing in this kind of thing to my executive staff? So at Marketo, we actually ran a test where we took a small sample of all of our leads and didn't nurture them, right? Obviously, I nurture most of our leads because we want to keep them kind of qualified and good. But we didn't nurture a sample of them, and then we looked at the results a while later. You know, if you don't nurture your leads, or if you do, on average, about a quarter, as I said, we identified as sales ready and passed to sales straight away. Of the leads that we did not nurture, over a long period of time, we only managed to identify another 8% that were showing the signs of being sales ready. Now compare that to the ones we did nurture, 25% of them essentially showed the behaviors of being sales ready. So we had 3 times better results in terms of developing those raw leads into being sales ready opportunities. What that nets out, as you see, is about 50% more sales ready leads in aggregate at 33% lower cost, right? And that to me is the direct value of nurturing versus not nurturing. You're going to be generating more of those types of highly qualified sales leads. I've mostly talked about nurturing. This session's about nurturing and scoring. Scoring is about identifying the leads that are right and ready and appropriate for the salespeople to work on right now. So what's the ROI of that? CSO Insights, which is an consultancy that sort of studies sales effectiveness primarily, they asked people to sort of say, how easy is it or hard is it for you to identify, to get the information that you need to prioritize your sales activities, right? Can you focus on the good stuff, right? Of the companies that said it was easy, they had 97% revenue attainment. They made 97% of the revenue plan. Companies that said it was hard made 79%. So there's almost a 20% revenue difference between companies that are good and find it easy to prioritize their leads. And that's what lead scoring is all about. It's giving the salespeople access to that information so that they can focus their time and energy on the right stuff. Sales is an expensive resource. A lot of value to getting them focused. So we have a really crowded room, hopefully packed full of marketers. Just to get a little energy in the room here, I just kind of want to get a sense of where we are as a group. This is some data from Marketing Sherpa that kind of shows across lots of companies what's the sort of the state of the best practice. But let's kind of just do a quick mini poll here. So I hate to do this, but I'm going to do it. Can everybody stand up for me, please? Thank you very much. Well, how embarrassing would it be if I asked that and nobody did it? No, thank you. So if you have a process to collaborate with sales to define sales-ready leads, please keep standing. Otherwise, if you don't have a process to collaborate with sales to define sales-ready leads, sit down. There's no shame in this. This is why you're here. We're going to help you. It can be taught. what I want everybody to do is be looking around to their left and right, who's standing next to them as we go through these, because those are going to be the people that I want you to meet also to learn some best practices. So number 2, who's got a system for rating qualified and warm leads? If you don't have that in your company today, please sit down. We got about half the people left standing, I think. For some reason, there's a clump over there. That's our expert group over there. Who has a process for nurturing leads that are not sales ready? If you're still standing, come up on the stage. No, I'm kidding. And lastly, who here has a process? This one's advanced. For taking leads that are not yet ready for sales and recycling them back into the marketing department. All right, so everybody who's still standing, I applaud you, sales marketing experts. Look around. These are your experts, and if you need a job, come talk to me. Okay, so with no further ado, I'd like to bring Dyke Henson, the CMO of Pivot Link, to share his experience with lead nurturing and some additional best practices.
Thanks. Okay, I want to ask you to stand up, but how many people here are responsible for creating the demand or the leads for the salespeople? Can you raise your hands? All right. So you'll relate to the moose here. Every quarter we're asked to pull a rabbit out of our hat. And it comes on every year, every quarter, and we need more and we need better qualified leads. I'm the CMO at Pivot Link. Let me just give you a quick commercial on us. We were founded in 1999. We're a fast-growing SaaS company. We do on-demand business intelligence, so you'll see a lot of metrics and measures. That's what we do. We have over 15,000 business users using our systems. We generate over 1.3 million analytical responses a month. And we keep about 90% of our customers, and we're shooting to even improve that. As far as our work with Salesforce, we brought Salesforce in 2007, and we use it pervasively. We use it for sales, we use it for marketing, we use it for support. And about a year ago, we brought in Marketo. And I came from a larger company where we did a lot of database marketing, and we were pretty analytical about the way that we found leads, the way that we scored them. And I did a quick scan of the universe and found Marketo, and they told me that they would have the system up and running in 60 days. And I laughed at them at first. And then 60 days later, we had an integrated system that combined both the marketing funnel and the Salesforce funnel and was giving us our analytics that we needed so that we could be smarter about doing our business. This is our actual data, and as I said, we track everything, and we don't look at one funnel. We look at lots of different funnels, and we measure one funnel against the other because for us, it all comes down to the quality of the lead and the cost of the lead. So the funnels on the left, I'll define as these are the people that found us. They either came through an SEM or they're an organic, and they convert at a pretty good rate because they're probably in a buying cycle. They're looking. The downside of that is if they're looking at us, they're probably looking at one of our competitors as well. So these are fast-track opportunities, but they're normally more competitive, and I'm not really sure we got to set the stage. Now, if you look on the other side, what we call the awareness funnel, and we broaden this funnel because it's beyond just direct response. We look at this as anything that raises the awareness. We tie in our PR. We tie in microsites. This is where we budget for our blog, etc. That conversion rate is much lower. But the good side of that is that those are the people that are in the early stages, and we can help hopefully shape their opinion, and when they do mature, that these are the people that we have a much higher percentage to close on. And our statistics actually show that. So as John said, people that are looking at us, 80% of them aren't ready to buy. About 20% are ready to buy. 80% are ready to be educated. And I think this is a big change with so much information that we have today. 10 years ago, when we did outbound direct response, it was like the blue light special. Buy now. It's a special offer. You need to move now. The market has changed, and really, there's so much information that can be gained on you and your competitors and everything else. You really have to look at this as an educational process. And that's where nurturing falls in. For us, when you look at the measurement, the people that are inbound, normally our days to conversion to a sales-ready lead is short. They're in a cycle. They're in a buying cycle. So we need to identify those folks, and we need to find the nurturing assets that help them at that stage of their cycle to move them to the next step. On the other side, on the direct response, 2009 was the year of the ox, the Chinese year of the ox. And I have to tell you, the ox had a long tail. People took a lot of time researching this year. But what we're finding is towards the end of the year, these are all starting to pay fruit. So it was an interesting year, but our nurturing programs, we never backed away from them. We stayed with them, and now they're starting to pay dividends. And you have the information. There's gold and then there are hills. The combination of campaign data, response data, combined with conversion rates and tied to the sales cycle within Salesforce.com gives you a wealth of information. You can look at this and start to segment your prospect database and look at the patterns of buying that happened at the close side, and then backward iterate to say, this is the ideal profile, and how do we make more of those within our outbound activity. We look to augment the nurturing campaigns by also comparing demographic and what we call psychographic, or what's the behavior of the people that buy. And then we look to isolate those, segment those, and then figure out the right nurturing asset to be able to deliver them, to deliver to them in their buying cycle. I won't go into a lot of scoring. That gets covered later. But scoring is key to this. Being able to score and segment your prospect database really gives you an idea of what campaigns are working in what stage. Like I said, one of the things that you get out of this is you can also identify a fast-track buying cycle. So you can see, uh-oh, these people did this, this, and this. Let's drive the score up. And you know what? We know the assets that they need because they're probably in a selection type process right now instead of an education process. And there's this combination of a marketing funnel and a sales funnel. And the reality is there's one funnel. There's a response to revenue. Lead nurturing starts after the response, but it also should carry through into the sales cycle. The notion that nurturing stops when we give it to a salesperson, you're really shortchanging the ability of your nurturing programs. You really should carry that down a little bit more. You can measure the response of things that happen. So there's certain assets that are going to help the salespeople. And if you can help automate that and put that into the nurturing process, they'll love you. When you think about what people are looking for in the classification, you first want to create interest. More times than not, if they're not in the fast track, you want to educate them around your solution. As they go further down in the buying cycle, you want to figure out when they're looking at you versus the competition, and you want to differentiate. And then in the final stages, you want to accelerate. So to give you a practical example, differentiate might be product information, technical information. When you want to accelerate, you might have some type of comparison between you and your competitors. Or you might have a case study that's just perfect for their industry of someone that's just like them. You know who they are, you know the profile, and you can drop that piece of collateral on them. That's one slice of nurturing. But if you draw a slice the other way, you're going to now create nurturing programs for the profile. So we sell to direct customers, we sell to partners. We actually use our nurturing process to educate analysts. So now we start building classes of collateral for the different segments, and then where they are in that actual process. And as I said, we look at nurturing beyond what we send them. There's a lot of ways that people are getting information. So we've expanded the whole nurturing process to include third-party sites. If someone's in an educational research, we have no problem sending someone to a blog or sending them to a third-party portal that has information about us as well as our competitors, because we want to be the person that's helping educate them. The other areas that fall into this, obviously, is blogs, LinkedIn groups. As I said, we look at nurturing, and we actually try to use that to sway the analyst community, and events like this. So all that becomes part of the awareness, that all becomes part of the capture, that all becomes a way of looking at giving the correct nurturing material to that segment of the market. And we talked about this earlier. The worst thing that can happen is that you create a bunch of quote-unquote leads, you give them to the salespeople make 3 or 4 calls, decide that they're not ready, they don't give them back to marketing, they sit, and you lose that opportunity. And if your competitor is there nurturing along the way, you've lost ground. So the first thing that you have to do is negotiate with your sales team. Okay, when do you want it? When is it qualified? But in return, you also have to get back from them, how many touches are you going to do? What's your follow-up? How much time will it take between you do your first phone call or your first email? And then if they don't make that, you say, give me back your dead. I'll take them back. I'll nurture them. I'll push them along. From that, I think you should set a bring back to life or a reincarnation metric. For us, it's about 20%. When the salespeople say, it's not ready, it's dead, it's whatever, we say, okay, give it back to us. Our goal is to bring about 20% of those that were pronounced dead and bring them back to life. And we do that all through automation and through nurturing. Typically, if they were a hot deal and they went cold, we'll try some type of shock treatment. We'll try some type of special offer. We'll try and wake them up. So we hit them with the defibrillator, see if there's a heartbeat, and we measure the effectiveness of those campaigns. If they are absolutely, positively, undeniably, and reliably dead, from the salesperson's perspective, we say, send them back. They're not really dead. So for us, and in my group, this is a fun time, because the things that you can't do and that are maybe too aggressive when you're trying to find a new client, I mean, you can experiment with the dead. They're dead. So, take a body part, put it in, put some electrodes, try and bring them back to life. The only thing that I will caution is you have to be respectful of any of the opt-out clauses. That's a no-go. Just stay away from that. If they say, listen, don't contact me anymore, you say, fine. But remember, that's one person. That doesn't mean the organization is dead. That doesn't mean the initiative in that organization is dead. So respect that opt-out, and then just surround that person with other nurturing campaigns to maybe his boss and the people to the left or to the right or somewhere else. Because just because you lost that individual, more times than not, doesn't mean that the opportunity is dead. It means that your relationship or your viability with that candidate is dead. But you still have a chance at the organization. So for me, they're never really dead until they opt out, or they're really pronounced dead. And as I said, have fun. Be challenging. Try and wake them up. Something that you wouldn't send to a first-time prospect, send it to the dead. We touched on this, and I'll just give some metrics. The reason why it costs a lot to build an in-house list. And we all know what's happened with the quality of the list and the responses to lists over the last 5 years. So the response rate on purchase lists, it's low. But if you nurture your in-house list, what we found is we can get anywhere between 2 and 6 times the response per campaign from the people that were either not ready or pronounced dead. And you know what? You paid the money for them already. So it's a very cost-effective way to do it. As I said, they're only really dead until we found out that they opt out, and the people around them say they opt out, and we found out that they bought the competitor's product, and they happen to be on the competitor's website. Now, that to me, I think they're dead. And this notion of combining old database analytics or outbound database marketing with nurturing is very, very powerful. So the next session you'll hear a little bit about scoring, but it's very important to segment and get a handle on this information and score, and then track how people are moving through that cycle. Just like a sales cycle, you have a marketing funnel, and your goal is to move them from one section to the next section. And as I said, we're a BI company, so we measure everything. So any metric that we can extract from Salesforce, that we can combine with the Marketo data and the campaign response, we track it by where they are in the cycle. We do the same thing that you've seen in sales analytics, where you do velocity from cycle to cycle to cycle. We do velocity reporting on how we move them from one stage qualification to the next. And then we track all those against cost. And at the end of the day, the way that we make our decision is on the effectiveness and the cost. So what's next? If I had my wish for John and his team, this is when I get to ask for new product features. For us, we need to be able to do faster and more efficient champion challenger. We do our own trending and patterns, but we'd like to see that in the Marketo product as well. How are things progressing over time? What's the snapshot of what we projected for at the beginning of the month to the end of the month? We do all this classification ourselves. We'd like to have some auto magic stuff that goes in and says, here's your good profiles, here's your mediums, here's your lukewarm, here's your hot. You can call that intelligent clustering as well. And next, we want to understand not only from our new prospects, but we want to have some type of affinity analysis to know when is the right time for our existing customers to go back through a nurturing campaign and try and push an upsell. And at the last, we'd like to just drop all the data in and have the application come back and say, I've optimized across all your different campaigns, and you should do A, B, and C in this order, and you'll get your best return. So that one's a little bit further down. Thank you.
Hey there. For those of you standing in the back and have been walking around this place all day and your feet are exhausted, there are some seats in the front. And if you want to come forward and fill in, we're only about halfway through the session. Take a load off. Come on in. Relax. Enjoy. My name is Emily Salas. I'm at CollabNet. And just to give you a little idea of why this might be relevant, we had a huge amount of traffic. We have an open source product, Subversion. We basically get about 20,000 downloads a week, which means we have somewhere between about 3,500 and 5,000 new entrants to our database every week. And there's no way we can throw that at our sales team. So we had to find a really good way of finding out who was just coming, downloading the open source product, and moving on, and who was really a sales candidate. So we had to find a way to do that, and the way we chose was lead scoring. So we're a mature organization. We're also 10 years old this year, so we're in good company. And we have a very large database. So a little bit about how we use Salesforce. We have sales, marketing, support services, a whole bunch of other people using the system. And we have a bunch of App Exchange dashboards and ranking and AskNet and Marketo. And so we're well integrated. So we put together our lead scoring. And I kind of jumped into this with both feet, and I said, where do I start? First thing to do was to build the right team. And in our case, the right team was me in marketing, basically marketing operations and lead nurturing, our demand generation manager, our director of sales operations, and our director of inside sales. And that's the core team, and then there were others, sometimes the VP marketing, sometimes the CEO, sometimes the VP sales, joining in for various pieces to see how this was going, because this was a very new concept. But really, the core team was essential, and we had to first decide, what is a sales-ready lead? How do we define that? Who is that? What does sales want to see? Because part of my job was also to build the relationship between marketing and sales to make sure we were really working together towards the same goals. So what is a sales-ready lead? For us, it's a combination of what I call demographics, so maybe the geography, the person's title or role, what kind of company they're in, what their revenue is, and their activity. And not just their activity over, you know, we want to measure not just what they're doing, but how long a period are they doing that over? Are they doing that over a week, a month, a year? Just when do they come into our system and how active are they? So not just are they qualified, but what have they done lately? And are they ready to purchase your products? So I didn't know how to start, and I didn't want to mess it up, because you really don't want to burn your bridges with sales if you're trying to build that relationship. So the first thing I recommend as my number one recommendation, if you have not implemented this yet, test it first. Test your hypotheses, see if it works before you implement it, because you only have one chance to make a first impression with sales when you set this up. So first you need to set a boundary for scoring. And that's kind of arbitrary. It could be 60, it could be 365. We chose 100. It's really, really easy to figure out a percentage of 100, to figure out how far along the way they are to getting to sales. Very, very difficult if it's 476. And then we needed to define what combination of demographics and activities is a sales-ready lead. What did they want to see? So we sat down and we said, okay, so if we had a director from this kind of company, from this location, who did these things, would that be someone you'd want to see? And they went, yeah, that would be. How about if it's a developer who downloads Subversion and nothing else? Yeah, not so much. So we needed to kind of define what that was. And then, believe it or not, I took about 300 or 400 leads and contacts out of Salesforce into a spreadsheet. And I said, if we were to score them today, using the scoring we think we're going to put in place that we agreed upon with sales, would they end up where they are now? So I looked at open leads in marketing, open leads in sales, what was in process with sales, what was an opportunity in sales, what was closed won. And for the opportunities in closed won, I said, well, if I scored them up to the point when they became that opportunity or just before that, would they have gotten that 100-point barrier for sales to know about them in the first place? And then, and I thought this was the coolest part, I took a bunch of leads that sales had said, unqualified, not for us, not ready, and I said, if we scored them, would they have ever gotten to sales in the first place? Would they have wasted their time calling up to find out, oh, we're not ready? And the answer was pretty much, no, they never would have gone to sales in the first place. They'd still be a marketing nurture, and sales would trust the leads that marketing was getting more than they are now. So test it, make that spreadsheet. Probably took me total a working week over a couple of weeks. Well worth the time to test the hypothesis. I highly recommend it. As you can see, it's kind of a bumpy road. So let me give you a few examples. If someone comes to us, they email us or they fill in a web form and they say, hey, I want some sales information, that would be a sales-ready lead. They get 100 points. They go directly to sales. But if someone comes and maybe they have, you know, part of their profile and it looks pretty good, but they've only done one thing, nurture candidate, they might be interested in buying sometime, or they might be doing best practices, or they might be an analyst, or they might be a competitor poking around. You don't know yet. That's a marketing nurture candidate. But if someone comes who's totally in profile, they're interactive on your website, they're downloading things, they're clicking in your email, they're highly responsive, you want them to get to that point threshold and go to sales when it's the right time, especially if they're doing that in a very short period of time. So I want to give you a little bit of, these are real campaigns in Marketo, what we do. So this is demographics. Someone gets entered into Salesforce, and we have not only the titles, we have a field we've created, a custom field called title level, and we sort those on 7 different levels, and they have different scoring for each one. And this is how we assign the scores. So this is what it really looks like. If they have this title level, assign them these many points. That's demographics. In activities, so we figure because we're a global organization, if someone doesn't come to the live webinar, maybe they wanted to, but they're in Japan and it wasn't at the time they'd actually be awake. So we score them the full amount of points for viewing a replay that we do for actually viewing the live webinar. And this is what we do. We have a large number of live webinars listed in this campaign, in this smart campaign in Marketo, and we assign that score. And then that, in combination with other activities, web activity, and demographics, will add up to a total that may or may not go to sales. We also do that for web pages, and this is my what counts for 5 points. Not all my web pages are scored. I really don't care if someone comes to the home page. It is not indicative of buying behavior. But if someone is going to a page where it talks about how we match against the competition, or how to integrate, or they're looking at something that has to do with implementation or best practices of how to make this work for you to gain certain business benefits, then I want to know about it and I want to score them. And then we have people who are fabulous. They're wonderful. They're part of our community, but they're students. They have no budget, and they're never going to be a sales candidate no matter what they do. And we love them, and we want to know where they are because we might do a special student or university program, but we don't ever want them to go to sales. And you have to remember that scoring is not something that says, this is how much a fan of our site they are. It's how much of a sales candidate are they. So even if a student comes, this runs every single night. This student campaign runs no matter what they do during the day. They could download 10 white papers. At the end of the day, they're going to be set to -500. But that allows me to know that if I do a list poll that says, give me everything between -500 and -250, I'm probably going to get all the students. So it's very handy. I've put our competitors in a different negative point range. I can find them too. So, results, and I'll get to this little chart. First of all, we have improved our lead flows. So I had this great conversation with one of our sales managers in Europe. He said, when I was on the road before, I used to get 2,000 emails a week. And if I was on the road at a hotel with a slow dial-up, I could not read my email and I could not communicate with my team because I had so many leads coming in. Now, I get maybe 20 a week. I write individual personalized messages to all of them, and 75% of them come back and ask me for questions, and then sales is engaged. They're having a real conversation. It's 2 individuals, and sales can do what they're best at, which is closing that deal. But they can't do that with 2,000. So we can quantify this. And this is really big. You know, marketing people, they're all the artsy people. They do this kind of random stuff, and they say that it's building brands, and we don't really know what they do. Yeah, well, we have 2 major sources. We have the downloaders, and we have everyone else. So we know that for every 18,000 download leads we get about 1 closed. Okay? But remember, we're getting like 20,000 downloads a week. So, you know, it adds up. But we also know that for everything else, for the traditional marketing campaigns that we're doing, for all the demand generation programs we're doing, we know that that is a very different number, as you can see. So then, if you look at where you're going to invest your time and money, well, you tell me where we're going to invest our time and money, but we have the numbers to prove it. There's hugely improved contact between sales and marketing. We have the same goals. We all work towards getting those opportunities because, as you can see, if you look at those opportunity to close rates, our sales team rocks. They get an opportunity, they're going to close it most of the time. At least, actually, it's more than half the time they're going to close that. But we have to get those opportunities. So sales and marketing, we are all based on opportunities. We have the same goals. And finally, we're using these numbers, these metrics, to report to the executive staff every week. They can look at these numbers. Now, we do our reporting based on a month, but those are incremental. Every week, we have someone who runs those reports, and so we can see incremental changes from week to week. But then we can take the monthly and the quarterly, and we can accumulate that data, and we can see if we're trending up or down and what's happening and what is happening with acceleration of those leads. Now that we have those numbers, now that we know what's going on, because we have Marketo in place, that reporting is being folded up into reports for the board meetings. And they talk about, well, if we know that we're investing this much in marketing right now, and these are the results we're getting, what would happen if we increase their budget? That's a really happy place for a marketer to be when the board is talking about increasing your budget, especially in 2009 and 2010. So the fact that we have numbers around this, we can track what's going on, we know the results, has been a huge impact. And not only that, we now have visibility. Marketing is visible to the executive staff and the board. So we're not just working there with that random creative stuff in the corner and nobody knows what marketing's really doing or where that money's going. Now everyone knows. We're accountable for it, but we can also show our results. So I'll turn that back to John.
Thank you, Dyke. Thank you, Emily. So let's just dive a little bit further into the practical guides about how you do some of the stuff in all the more detail. So as I said, the Definitive Guide to Lead Nurturing, most of you should have a copy of it. The Definitive Guide to Lead Nurturing describes 4 styles or types of lead nurturing campaigns that you should be thinking about. So I'll go through each of these at a high level. The book goes through them in all more detail. Incoming lead processing, stay in touch, lead accelerators, and then lead lifecycle. Incoming lead processing, there's really 3 types of things you want to think about when you're incoming lead processing. This is your first impression with a lead, and how you deal with them and bring them into the nurture process can have a big impact in terms of how you develop with them over time. The first thing, this one's pretty easy to figure out, but it's like, what are you going to send to sales? And there's really, I've seen kind of 2 main ways of thinking about this. Some people say everything's going to go to sales, right? And then either one of 2 things happen. Sales either contacts everybody and decides who they're going to take and who they're going to sort of recycle back, or sales cherry picks, and then everybody else just kind of languishes. The second option is you don't send things to sales until the threshold is met. For example, 100 points or whatever. To be honest, I don't have, I think either approaches are okay. Either you want to call everybody to qualify just to make sure you're not missing anything, or you set the thresholds. I probably slightly prefer the threshold one, but it's all about sort of managing that with your sales team. But the point is to have a process to make sure that you're kind of kick-starting that whole thing off. Second, establish the permission for nurturing. There's actually quite a long section in the guide about this. It describes the different ways to think about it. But to kind of simplify it and net it out, remember that nurturing is about relationship building. And if you're not actually building a relationship, you're just sending emails or leaving voicemail messages. And so, there's this tension between wanting to really have people, double opt in or whatever to your nurturing and raise their hand and say, yes, I want to be nurtured by you, right? But the tension is, anytime you put a double opt-in into place, you're always going to lose some people just because people don't see emails or get busy or whatnot. So you kind of have to balance those 2 things. What we do at Marketo is if somebody has come to our site, if you come to my site and fill out the form to watch my demo, I'm going to basically start nurturing you, right? I think you've sort of shown some engagement directly with us, and we're going to get started so I don't lose you on that double opt-in. But, if I get a list from a trade show or something like that, where you may not have necessarily know that you have a relationship with Marketo, even if I have that permission to mail you because you gave permission when you registered for the trade show, right? We're gonna opt you in. We're gonna send you an email saying, hey, would you like to receive our best practices? If you don't respond to that, we'll try one more time, and that's all automated. And if you still don't respond to that, we're not going to nurture. We're not going to put you into the nurture program. So you just got to think about how are you going to kind of set up that process? How are you going to put people into the different buckets, send it forward? And the last piece is establishing preferences. Nurturing is about relationship building. How do you want to customize how you nurture people based upon who they are? So one of the things we do at Marketo is we say, hey, by default, we're going to send you information every 2 weeks. But would you like to learn even faster? If you want, accelerate, and we'll send it to you every week. So we let people choose their timing. And it's pretty amazing how many people then, when they're saying, yes, I want to accelerate, give us additional information. I'm looking at this, I'm interested in these things, I actually have a project. So it's a great opportunity to get more information from prospects when they're sort of really opting into that sort of deeper level. You then get to the core of nurturing, which is the stay in touch campaigns. Right? This is all about filling that lead gap between when they first meet them until they're ready for sales. And usually it's going to be some sort of dripping out of information that's relevant to them over time. And there's really two dimensions of it. There's kind of who they are and then where they are in the buying cycle. Marketing Sherp actually did a study. It's not on the slide here. But the most important thing to differentiate your nurturing content tends to be by industry. If you sell to multiple industries, trying to target by industry is what buyers value the most. Second most important is by role. So different content for doers versus executives, or IT versus business, however it is you segment it out. This dimension is really talking about buying stage. And Dyke alluded to this kind of at a high level. I break our nurturing into 3 main stages. The early stage content is thought leadership. That's really meant to be appropriate for anybody, regardless of where you are in the buying cycle. So this is information about how do you do lead nurturing? How do you do lead scoring? 10 tips for building marketing sales alignment. How to plan your marketing budget for 2010. Right? So just content that's just going to be appealing to everybody. It has nothing to do with marketing automation or Marketo, whatever. The middle stage is content that's about, okay, you're maybe starting to think about a buy cycle, so it's, what information should you consider? What questions should you ask a vendor, or an RFP template, maybe an analyst overview of the space. So it's going to kind of help you structure your buying decision. And then late stage is really company-specific information. This is about Marketo. Case study, pricing, training implementation, services content. And what happens is, and now I'm jumping to really the third type of nurturing campaign, which are accelerators, we're watching what people do. And as they, everybody goes into early stage, but as you start maybe showing buying signs of doing things that are maybe moving, that you're further ahead, we're going to try to push you, there gently, faster, by moving you to sort of middle stage. And if a salesperson creates an opportunity for you, we're going to move you into the late stage. And that really addresses Dyke's point that marketing shouldn't stop just because the sales is engaged. Marketing should be providing the air cover. So you set up all these different type of campaigns, and then you sort of drip over time. I'm going to segue out of the 4 types for a sec now to talk about scoring for a minute. Emily talked a lot about scoring, demographics, she covered, and then behaviors. The key point I kind of want to add into that is you can actually separate out the types of behaviors that people have based upon if those behaviors show interest and engagement or actual buying activity. So, attending a webinar, downloading thought leadership, visiting your website, those all show interest in the product. If you download the Definitive Guide to Lead Nurturing off my website, I know you're interested in lead nurturing. And you can get to a pretty high lead score that way, which shows you care about these things, but maybe you don't actually have a project. Active behavior, is showing active buying signs. You install the App Exchange app off of the App Exchange, that's pretty interested. Turns out one of the highest things that are most indicative of somebody entering in a buy cycle from Marketo, I would have thought this going in, is visiting our website twice in a week. Right? Somehow when we see that, 42% of those people become an opportunity, within the next 2 weeks. Using the keyword Marketo in a search term, right? It actually tends to sort of be fairly interesting in terms of the buying behaviors. I should also point out it's important to decay scores if they haven't done a behavior recently, because otherwise you could get to somebody in Emily's world that's like 99 points, then they don't do anything for 3 months, and then they do one thing, and they're not really hot right then and there. So that's why you want to decay scores for inactivity. So now getting into that 4th type of lead nurturing, and this connects to the scoring, is what we call sort of the lead life cycle, the lead follow-up process. And what we do is we've broken our prospects into 3 tiers. Enterprise, in our world, that's more than $300 million in revenue. Target, which is, a real marketer at a real company who can and able to sort of buy a product like Marketo. And then other, these might be, agencies or, influencers and accounts, things like that. And then across the top, are they showing latent buying behaviors or active buying behaviors? Now, in all 6 of these cases, we don't do necessarily this bucketing until someone gets to a high score, all right? But then the nuance here is there's different types of high scores. And depending on what type they are, we're going to follow up differently. If they are sort of showing active buying sign, we're going to qualify them as quickly as possible. And that's, hi, I see you're interested in marketing automation, do you have a budget? Right? And that's a reasonable conversation to have with somebody in that bucket. On the latent buying behaviors, right, again, these are high score people. They're interested, they're active, they're engaged. They just don't have a project. So here you've really got to be strategic about thinking about how do you use the human touch. Now it's time for the human touch. So how does a person develop an opportunity at this account? And you've got to be smart about it. That can involve, maybe you have a title for a manager, is the person with the high score. Maybe you need to actually try to call their boss or the executive. Sometimes in our world, we're going to see a salesperson who's downloading tons of information about lead scoring, right? But that person probably won't, an individual sales rep isn't going to buy Marketo, but it's a pretty interesting conversation to call the marketing executive at the company, say, do you know your salespeople are interested in lead scoring? So sort of thinking about what's the right way to take that latent buying and turn it into active buying. It can be sending a relevant case study. Sometimes we'll go to the website, fill out a form, see what kind of response we get. And we say, hey, we posed as a prospect on your site. Here's what happened. We have some ideas for you. The idea is to categorize even your high score leads, do the right lead lifecycle follow-up. Now, to enforce that, we've actually established SLAs between marketing and sales that says when you get a sales-ready lead, you are going to touch it within 24 hours. And then so that's the first SLA. And the second SLA is that they have to decide what to do with it. They either need to move it forward as an opportunity, disqualify it, or recycle it back to marketing within 7 days. Right? And we enforce that SLA using an automated process. So they get an alert when it happens. This is just a quick example of it, but it basically says after 24 hours, if that lead is still in what we call the sales lead untouched list, and we're identifying that based upon how they logged in activity or a call or changed the status for that person, if they're still in that sales lead untouched list, they get an alert. We wait another 24 hours, and if that person's still on the sales lead untouched, they get an alert, as does their boss, the head of sales, and me. And if that person's still untouched after 72 hours, the email alert also goes to the CEO. And you don't want to have that conversation. So, and then we kind of cycle through that. So the reason I talk about this is because it's a kind of lead nurturing process. It just doesn't have to do with sort of emailing people or sending phone calls. It's really automating the process of how are you managing your lead life cycles. And then, as they recycle isn't a dirty word at Marketo. It's all about taking that person and then maybe then bringing them back to marketing for further development. We lower their score down, and then if they get hot again, they kind of go back to the salesperson. The last thing I wanted to sort of show you just a little bit on this is, what does it all look like from our salesperson's perspective? So, Marketo has an application that we call Sales Insights, a native Salesforce app that really shows the sort of interesting things that their leads and contacts have done, and then buckets all that into stars and flames for the salesperson. So it sort of takes that lead score number and synthesizes out into 1 to 3 stars, or 0 to 3 stars, and 0 to 3 flames. The stars are showing is this the right quality type of person, and the flames show is this kind of an urgency type of person. And then from there, the salespeople can dive into the record and see all the activities, choose to recycle the lead or not. But sort of exposing that visibility to them is a really good way to get them to see the benefit and all the hard work that marketing is doing, but right in the tool that they're using every single day. So just a couple of takeaways, and then we can have some question and answer. Buying behavior has transformed in the last 10 years, and demand generation needs to keep up. Lead nurturing, lead scoring are high ROI activities where you can be generating 50% more sales-ready leads and generate 20% better revenue attainment by prioritizing your salespeople's time. This is not a marketing-specific problem. It is a marketing and sales function. You have to think about going beyond the marketing department to focus on the entire revenue cycle. That has to do with both communication, but actually the types of lead nurturing processes you do that aren't just talking about developing early-stage leads, but are really how are you nurturing into the opportunity cycle and beyond. And then lastly, Emily alluded to this, you're never going to get your total nurture program right on the first time, right? You probably don't have enough content yet to do it right exactly the way you want the first time. One piece of advice I have is, think about a big vision of how you're going to do lead nurturing, how you want to score your leads, but start small. Get started. Do something. And then make it better over time, and better over time, and better over time. And that incrementalism and adaptability is, I think, one of the most important ideas for success with lead nurturing. I'm supposed to remind you, please fill out the survey, enter to win, and help us make Dreamforce better every single year. And with that, I'd like to we just have a couple more minutes for Q&A. I'd like to open it up, see if anybody has any questions. A few last reminders before I do get to that. Make sure you get your copy of the definitive guide. Make sure to sign up for the Marketing Cloud Party tomorrow. And if even after the session, if you guys want to break, I'll stay up here or try if I can on the side to answer more questions. Thank you for your time. I think we'll have some people shuffling out. And is there a microphone for the audience? So it looks like if you want to ask a question, you're supposed to go up to the stand. So first question.
Question for Emily. I work for a company called SolarWinds, and we have kind of high volumes that are similar to what I think you've got. And so we're struggling with a lead scoring that I think you've sorted out some of the same problems. How do you deal with activities that take place by someone that you don't yet know? If they're anonymous, if they come to the website and that's interesting, but I don't know their name, and I won't know their name until they register.
So Marketo has an API that you can put that's part of implementing on your web pages, and that's tracked as anonymous activity. And then when they do fill out a form or something like that, that cookied information on that computer, all their previous activity will be associated with that cookie, with that email address, so that those two things are brought together, so that anonymous activity becomes known. And
which
John
ends up being
can probably
very
tell you.
interesting because sometimes you'll meet somebody and the first thing they've done is, to you it looks like they filled out their form, but then you look at that and they actually have a 200-point score because of everything they've done before. The other thing that you can do, and let you do, is we do an IP lookup to figure out, what company is that person from. So we won't be able to tell you that that 500-point lead person is, Emily Salas, but we'll be telling you that somebody from ClabNet has a really high score, even if they haven't registered. Are there other questions? You can probably just raise your hand and yell it out, too, if you want.
And I'll stick around also if anyone wants to come up and doesn't want to say anything in public.
And no, feel free to walk out, too. It's all right. Yes, question? Yep. Sure. So the question is, are the scores defined kind of algorithmically or by us in advance, and did they change over time? The way it works is that as part of getting up and running with the system, we'll share with you all the best practices across our customers. So we say, this is what a lot of our customers do. What do you want to take into your company? How do you want to evolve it? And so we implement you with sort of a version of our best practice for your company. And then there are reports that you can go look at that essentially show you when people show certain behaviors or have certain titles or for each of your different scoring rules, what really does happen, over time. Now, we don't automatically then go update your scoring rule because we do want you to manage that and control it. Because the scoring needs to have some meaning over time in terms of comparisons. So we want you to actually sort of say, I'm actively deciding to change something.
And you should be doing that in conjunction with your sales team anyway. So you should be saying, hey, in this report, we're seeing that, white papers had a higher value than we thought they did before. And we're thinking that might be something that deserves a higher score because it looks like, something's going on there. And, do you agree with us? And I did have this conversation basically on one activity with my sales team, and I said, I'm thinking this should be a higher score, and the director of sales ops came back in with a really good argument of why it shouldn't, and I went, you're right. So it was really good to get the input.
You also get a lot of feedback on scoring just from talking. Like I'll talk to my guys, hey, what kind of leads are you getting? And generally I focus on the bad leads they get to try to keep the bad leads away. So one conversation said, we get a lot of job applicants because the job applicant tends to download a lot of stuff. So that was the origin of, if they go to the careers section, lower their scoring. We get a lot of people from India and China that just don't really seem qualified. They don't return our calls when we call them. So, okay, I know what country somebody's on because I know their IP address and I can do a lookup to their country. So lower the score, based upon country. So that closed loop conversation tends to be perhaps even more important than anything we could do analytically. I think we are out of time according to the clock. So thank you again, everybody. If you want to learn more about nurturing and scoring,